Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our monthly Transit Choices meeting. My name is Robin Budish, and I'm the Director of Transit Choices. Since our inception over a decade ago, our mission has been to advocate for a first-rate regional transit system in Baltimore and throughout Maryland, a system that is equitable, efficient, safe, and reliable. We are very excited to bring you two important presentations this morning. We are going to begin with Liz Gordon. Liz is the Assistant Deputy Administrator for Planning and Programming with the Maryland Transit Administration. Liz's presentation today is titled Bmore Bus Plan Update. We are very excited to have a status report on where things are for this very, very important project and certainly support the very hard efforts on behalf of Liz and the MTA to move this project forward. So good morning, Liz, and welcome.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. I am going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can see some of these slides. I'm more of a Teams person, so give me a moment.
Sure.
How's this? Visible?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Visible in full screen, perhaps? That's where we're trying to get.
It is.
Great. Okay, cool. So I just wanted to bring this group an update on our Bmore Bus Plan, which is a bus-focused strategic planning effort that we've undertaken here at MTA. Bus really is our heavy hauling route in terms of how many of our trips it serves, something like 85%. I think I recall, although it changes year to year. And thanks, Robin, for the invitation. Happy to give an update on this. In terms of what we're going to cover today, just an introduction to the study and what it is, which you may have heard of before, may not have because it has been out in the public for a little over a year. Some of the context in terms of our state budget situation and how this plan is landing within that context. And then we'll talk through the process, and we'll also, though the plan is not published quite yet, we will talk a little bit about what some of the recommendations of the plan are likely to be. And we will also talk about what the next steps are. An introduction to the study. It's a transit plan for the Baltimore region that's really identifying what service improvements could be possible for bus with expanded resources. And to be really clear about what expanded resources means in this context, it may not feel like it as a writer of the system, but MTA is actually by many measures very efficient with the way we use our bus resources, meaning that peanut butter is spread pretty thin. We're getting a lot out of our buses, we're getting a lot out of our operators, and in order to significantly expand our bus service beyond what we already do through the annual service process where we try to find efficiencies, we really would need a fifth bus division, which is a significant capital investment, and all of the operational resource increase that comes with staffing that fifth bus division with operators and with mechanics, and also with buying the buses to expand the fleet and the ongoing cost, because we do turn over a fraction of our fleet every year. That fraction of the fleet would stay the same percentage-wise because their useful life stays the same, but it would be more buses that we'd be buying every year. So we do want to be honest about what that investment cost is to do a significant increase in the amount of bus service. What this plan also sought to do was to get a lot of input and look at a lot of data in terms of what should we do if we got that really significant increase in resources. What should we do with it? We're considering more frequent service on our routes that already exist, adding new or modified routes to serve new destinations and new connections, expanding the hours of service, so longer on the weekends, later into the evenings, more overnight service, stuff like that. And then also we did want to look at, both in terms of data and preferences, new service types like limited stop and also on-demand transit, stuff like that. So in terms of the context of the budget, The budget that just passed in Annapolis this month did include a revenue increase of approximately $450 million a year for transportation. And that is great. And that decision to increase revenue, because it's one thing to say increased revenue, but people do experience that as fees and other things that they're paying in their daily life. So it's always, when making the decision to increase revenue, it's always kind of a heavy decision. And this time it was based on the need to adequately fund some of these really core transportation priorities for the state of Maryland, like safety and a fully functioning transit system. So MTA's budget that came out was really, really focused on state of good repair projects and investments. So that's how we accomplish both safety and function and reliability, is we make sure our stuff is in good working order. So expansion, including that envisioned for Bmore Bus, because I did just lay out some of the capital expenses, is not the focus of this budget. But this plan is saying that it's still really important to lay out a vision for the future, describe a vision for the future, know what we do with expansion resources, but it's not in the budget at this time. So it is in the budget in terms of those SGR investments. Those are pretty exciting and will have a customer impact. They're not all behind the curtain stuff. So that included the light rail modernization program, which will replace all of MTA's vehicles. And then there's light rail vehicles. And then there's track work, station work, system work, and maintenance facility upgrades that are necessary to operate these modern low floor vehicles. So that's an exciting one. And then we just have priority state of good repair projects across all our modes, all our facilities. And that's stuff that is incredibly important, but, you know, not the flashiest. So that's metro station attendant booths, that's communication systems, power systems, making sure water doesn't get into our concrete, important stuff. HVAC repairs, roof repairs, so that our staff can work in safe, dry facilities that are a reasonable temperature, like pretty core stuff. And then in terms of what it would take on top of this SGR focused budget to really implement this plan, it would take a 20 to 25% expansion of MTA's bus fleet, 240 to 260 additional vehicles. And each bus at this point is over $1 million. So that's a $365 million investment in buses, plus a percentage of those turning over each year. It would also take a construction of a new fifth division. And that facility would need to be large enough to accommodate bus storage and maintenance for that additional fleet. And this is a really rough guess, but we think a conservative approximation for how much that would cost is $650 million all in. So that's design, construction, commissioning, a state-of-the-art facility, the whole deal. And then we do think that on the staffing and operations cost side, that it would be approximately $130 million annually for all of the staff that it would take to operate and maintain those buses and manage all of those teams. So we do want to be clear up front that this is not, that adding more bus service is a large investment. So the process of the study to get to our recommendations. In phase one, we did a lot of review of data analysis and also a lot of review of the public input from our many ongoing projects and a lot of review of our origin and destination survey data. And then we also went to the public with really brief questionnaires, and the outreach was really focused on our writers. And some of the things that we saw in terms of themes was that people were really interested in improved frequency. I think that reflects our writers' experience pretty well. But when we asked people, you know, where else would you like to go? What else should we be connecting to? What should we know? The stuff that they volunteered in terms of destinations that were important to them is captured in this word cloud. So you can really see Ellicott City, Annapolis, Columbia, more connections to Baltimore. These are high priorities for people. In terms of just some comments, which were informative to us. We have many, many dozens of these. Non-peak service, our peak service, buses run pretty frequently, but I think we've seen travel patterns shift since 2020 in ways where the peaks aren't as peaky as they used to be, and the types of travel that people are doing are different. Late night buses, similarly, we see travel patterns that are skewed later and earlier. And then express buses all day. So a big theme is that 9 to 5 workforce focused transit service isn't working for as many people as it used to. And then in phase 2, what we did is we took all of that information, all of the data, all of the input, and we kind of distilled it into 2 approaches to distributing these resources that we might get, right? So instead of just asking broadly, what do you like, where do you want to go, or asking too specifically, what do you think of this route, that route, that route, we instead took the kind of 2 approaches, and one was really focused on enhancing frequency. So we used the vast majority of the resources in that scenario to show people what it would look like, what service would look like if we really just doubled down on making our existing service more frequent. And then a second scenario did more things to introduce some of those new service types, also introduced some new destinations, and we thought of that as the expanded service scenario. So 2 ways to think about it. The engagement that we did to get people's feedback on this was in September and October of last year. We did in-person open houses. We did pop-ups at all sorts of events. We presented to our bus operations performance squad, our operators advisory council, because we do want internal input on this as well, our citizens advisory council, our advisory council that's focused on accessibility, our implementation team for our regional transit plan, which includes agency and jurisdiction partners. And then we did a lot of material distribution to community organizations, just to make sure that people had an opportunity to weigh in and saw what we were doing. And we did a purchased media campaign, digital ads, social media, radio, streaming, as well as advertising on our own buses and screens. So we got a lot of feedback, and it was clear this is nice when the feedback sort of reaches a place of consensus. So 70 to 30 people care about frequency. They want the bus to come. This makes sense, right? I think there can be a lot of focus on how fast is the bus or train going, but how frequent it is a really important factor into how it can fit in your life. It's like if you have a really, really fast car, but your garage door only opens twice an hour, it doesn't really matter that your car's that fast. So I think this reflects the experience of our writers. What people did like about the expanded service scenario is people did comment that they liked the more connectivity, and some people were compelled by having access to bus service that they don't now for certain connections. But pretty overwhelmingly, frequency was what people cared about. When we were asking people specifically to rank our 6 priorities, different types of frequency were ranked 1, 2, and 3. So clear consensus. But in terms of, are we going to serve new places with some microtransit? Look into that. Are we going to serve new places with some regional or commuter bus? There were some interesting conclusions there. There's a lot of desire to have better connection between Annapolis and Baltimore and Columbia and Baltimore. Frederick to Baltimore wasn't as high a priority, but that's one of those things where we'll keep looking at the data to see if that travel relationship strengthens. When we looked at places where maybe a microtransit network, a kind of neighborhood circulating microtransit network could complement the core bus service. The priorities there were in Southwest Baltimore, Reisterstown, Owings Mills, Edmondson, that kind of area. So after looking at those two scenarios and the feedback that we got from them, we did start distilling these into a visionary network. Kind of what would it look like for us to distribute these resources according to your priorities that you've shared. And what that looked like was, boy, a lot of increased frequency, like mostly stuff from scenario one, but also some things from scenario two that did get positive feedback. So improvements to our existing Quick Link 40 in terms of expanding its hours, stuff like that. And then also some limited stop service on some other high ridership corridors. So that's the new Quick Link routes. And then there were some places where the data was suggesting that there could be opportunities to extend routes, adjust routes, stuff like that. By the numbers, on weekdays, all of our City Link service would be getting increased frequency unless that corridor was also getting a Quick Link route. The vast majority of our local links would be getting increased frequency and a little bit of frequency on our express bus links. And then a lot of this frequency improvement was really focused on weekend service improvements and overnight service improvements. People are just traveling differently than they used to be. And this is also reflecting a bit of an unmet market at this time, people who travel later and people who travel on the weekends. The full visionary network is explained much better in the full report, but that's not out quite yet. But in terms of just a summary of what it would be accomplishing, what you can see on the map on the right is the number of additional bus trips that will occur in any given zone in a week. And so you can see that in that dark purple, that's 3,000 additional trips, right? So right downtown, where a bunch of bus routes converge, you see some of that dark purple, and that makes sense. Everything's converging down there, so you're seeing a big increase in service. But you're also seeing a big increase in service over in Randallstown, up by Towson, some of these, and also in Southwest Baltimore and into Anne Arundel County. So some of these places where the frequency right now is quite low and transit is sort of a lifeline service, there's demand for those places to hit a higher service standard. And so that's a lot of what this plan is accomplishing. And while the specifics of when the increased frequency is occurring are interesting and good, I think this is a good summary of where those resources are going geographically. Qualitatively, there's a lot more places that are very high frequency, so more riders could just hop on the bus without a schedule. In terms of route adjustments, there are more one-seat trips, trying to meet point-to-point demand more. People are less tolerant of transfers than they were when we did the origin and destination survey 5 years ago, over 5 years ago. So that's just a pattern that we see, and it's important to kind of try to meet that. And then just the benefits of better and more frequent transit. Riders are less likely to miss work, and more people whose jobs are outside of a 9-to-5 schedule can have transit meet their needs. In terms of what's going on now, when will the plan come out? We anticipate this spring. It shouldn't take too much longer, but we are at this time reviewing the recommendations in light of the budget context and have the expectation that it should be out as soon as we can responsibly conclude that deliberation and shape those recommendations a little more. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Liz. We look forward to inviting you back when the report is sort of finalized, made public. And we want to acknowledge, this is an enormous undertaking. Our bus system is so important to the citizens of Baltimore and beyond. And you keep mentioning sort of not just reliability, but also frequency, really important. So we are grateful for your commitment and hard work to move this particular project forward. As always, you have the support of Transit Choices. We spent a lot of time in Annapolis during this legislative session, really strongly advocating for additional funding, committed, dedicated additional funding for public transit. And we will continue to do that. So please let us know how we may continue to support your efforts and those on behalf of MTA regarding this project. We are happy to do it. I'd like to open the floor to questions. Jimmy?
Yeah, Liz, thanks for a great presentation. I'm always impressed by the work you do and the way you present it, and the work the MTA does on envisioning a better future. So thank you for that. The question I have has to deal with school kids. There's been a lot of talk lately with a banner investigative journalism about how frequently school kids are not getting to school in time for their first period class, and what a devastating effect that has in their overall approach to education, and even eventually leading to students dropping out because of the unreliability of bus service. So in your planning for the future, are you directly addressing this issue? And if so, how? Thanks.
Yeah, so it's a really good question. I will acknowledge up front that the situation of the MTA being the primary school transportation provider for the Baltimore City public schools, that's pretty unusual. And it is difficult for a public transit agency to balance meeting the needs of school kids that have very particular travel needs and also the general traveling public, right? So a lot of the way that we try to do that is we try to schedule school tripper services. And we try to do that in coordination with Baltimore City Public Schools to really hit the highest demand connections for school kids so that as many of the students as possible can be on routes and on trips that are really designed and dedicated for them. However, what complicates that further is the school choice system that we have here in Baltimore, where you have really, really dispersed origins and destinations for these kids. So there aren't neighborhood schools where there's a very predictable travel flow. There is instead year to year, really different combinations of origins and destinations that we're trying to serve. So we do coordinate really closely with Baltimore City Public Schools, and we're always trying to better coordinate and better support them. That's really done out of our Office of Service Development through the annual service planning process. And one really good example of that right now is that team is working really hard to support the move that's going on for Poly. So we really do make efforts at that coordination. I will say, especially given the school choice system and the realities of that, a lot of making the system work better for students is making the system work better and be more frequent for everyone. And so, students were among the people who really cited frequency as an important concern. And that's really what we hear from our Youth Transit Council as well. Missing a bus or a bus being cut or canceled because of our equipment availability is much higher stakes if you have to wait 45 minutes versus 10. So I think, especially with the really, really diverse origins and destinations in a school choice city, strengthening the underlying network tremendously benefits that situation. So that's part of the calculation here. I will also say that because as I stated up top, our resources are used very efficiently. It is the case that while we strive to have more and better school trippers, and while we strive to interline them and schedule them really efficiently with our other service, there comes a point where more dedicated school trips mean fewer buses and operators available to serve the traveling public, workers, et cetera. So it's a real balancing act. It's something that we're always trying to improve and trying to improve our coordination. And it's absolutely something that would be a situation that would be improved and that would benefit from more resources overall.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Jean Lee?
Good morning, everyone. Liz, thanks a lot for taking the time to meet with us. This was very informative. So the question that I have is really in regards to that fifth bus division that would be necessary to expand service in the area. Just out of curiosity, has that fifth bus division been programmed into any out-year budget plans yet?
No.
Okay. Also, curious to know, is there any conversation between MDOT, MTA, and the BRTB around the possible use of flexible funds from highway programs to support the construction of a fifth bus division?
So I think that someone from the Secretary's office from MDOT could certainly answer that with more specificity, because the budget distribution responsibility across the modes just lives with them. But that is something that we do. I mean, we do $40+ million a year of transfers of CMAQ, and there have in recent years been exploration of even further transfers of highway federal funds over to transit uses. So that's definitely something that they explore in any given year, depending on what the priorities are. But if you wanted more specificity, someone from MDOT would be the right person.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anna? Anna, you're on mute.
Hi. Yeah, just trying to find the mute button. Hi, thank you for the presentation. This is really it's very helpful to know what's going on. My question is sort of related to what Jimmy was asking about reliability, which to me seems like the top priority. And I guess you guys are looking more for what we can do in the future, but reliability is a huge issue. I mean, the bus that I take, the one that goes downtown, I mean, it runs every 40 minutes or so, or even less frequently at times. And if it doesn't show up, you're kind of screwed. You need to have some kind of backup plan. And I guess is the whole overall reliability issue part of this, or is that?
Yeah, it sort of depends depends what you mean by part of this. Is it part of the Bmore Bus planning effort? Not really, but right on the Bmore Bus page, there's a big call out box that says, what about reliability? What about my bus right now?
Yeah, well, because when I took the survey, I mentioned the fact that the reliability was not one of the concerns that was listed. So so the reason for that isn't because we're not concerned about it. It's because that has its whole own separate effort in terms of our customer experience dashboard and our ongoing efforts to improve reliability right now. And we have pretty aggressive goals in terms of reducing our cut service and increasing our on-time performance. And so I will drop the link to the reliability dashboard in the chat here. And you're welcome to go check it out. But the experience that you're describing of a bus just not showing up, that's typically because we cut that bus, we cut the run, right? And we typically cut the run because an operator wasn't available or a bus wasn't available. And
when that occurs, that's something where we were trying to use our resources as efficiently as possible, predict exactly how much service we could provide to use every resource as much as we can. And it's something didn't line up between the scheduled amount of service that we predicted and the number of bodies and buses that were actually available to deliver that service. And that just like can't happen, right? And so we have a goal of less than 1% cut service on any given day. And we're getting closer and closer to it and hitting that goal on some days. If you look at the customer experience dashboard, you can see that trend over time. So that's definitely something that we're aware of. It has a whole separate effort. And the only reason they're separated is because they're just sort of different exercises from a data standpoint and a process standpoint, but and who's the responsible party to implement them, but we're certainly all in conversation about that really important priority.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We will have to let that be our last question for this particular segment. However, for those of you that wish to ask an additional question or have comment or feedback, please feel free to put it in the chat. I will share that with our guest presenters and get back to you, if appropriate, with responses to what you've shared. So thank you again, Liz, very much, and we're happy to share your presentation at the conclusion of this meeting. Our next guest presenter is Kate Foster. It's our pleasure to have her with us. Kate is the Senior Director of Trail Development and Equity with the Rails to Trails Conservancy. And I misspoke. I'd like to introduce Reverend Kate Foster. Kate's colleague, Greg Lawson, had planned to join us this morning. Unfortunately, he's not feeling well. So Kate is going to be our featured presenter this morning. And her presentation is titled The Baltimore Greenway Trails Network, an Opportunity for the City. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you very much. Before I share my screen and start the slide presentation, I just want to recognize a couple people that I see who have joined us this morning. And one is Peter Harnick. Is he still on here? I believe he is. Yes. He is a co-founder of Rails to Trails. And so I'm really excited and a little bit humbled to have you on here. I feel like you should be giving this presentation, but really glad to have you here. And the other is Chip Place, who is a recent retiree to the greater metropolitan area. And he is a member of the steering committee of the Baltimore Greenway Trails Coalition. And so, Chip, I'm really glad to have you here. He has brought a wealth of experience in trail development to our coalition. So just wanted to give a shout out to both of them. So let me share my screen now so we can get started with why is it not sharing? I haven't used Zoom in a very long time, you guys. Okay, here we go. All right.
Perfect.
Here we go. So the Baltimore Greenway Trails Network. Before I get into it, I want to just tell you a little bit about Rails to Trails in case you aren't familiar with who we are and what we do. Rails to Trails is the nation's largest trails, walking, and biking advocacy organization. Our mission is to build a nation connected by trails, reimagining public spaces to create safe ways for everyone to walk, bike, and be active outdoors. So imagine that everybody in the US could walk outside their door and be within easy walking distance of an off-road or protected trail to walk, run, bike, or roll. That is the vision. So what do we mean when we say trails? We advocate for the development of multi-use trails. There is a common misconception out there about Rails to Trails that we only develop rail trails, but we also do other kinds of trails. And so one kind of trail is a rail trail, which is taking advantage of the railroad right-of-way. when it is abandoned to use it for trail purposes. Another is rails with trails. So you can see in the picture in the middle, that's a trail also taking advantage of the right-of-way, but coexisting with an active rail line. And then we also advocate for the development of greenways, and that's what we are working on here in Baltimore. We have a portfolio of trail projects. One that is probably our most famous is the Great American Rail Trail, which when it's finished will connect Washington, D.C. with Washington State. But we also have a portfolio of trail networks where we are investing resources to advance them and eventually complete them. And one of those includes the Baltimore Greenway Trails Network. So what is the Baltimore Greenway Trails Network? It's a nearly 50-mile connected multi-use trail network. So you can see in the map here, if you're not familiar with it, when it's completed, it will connect much of Baltimore, more than 75 neighborhoods, and it will connect a lot of our significant cultural and educational institutions and employment centers. So it's a little bit hard to see in this map, but the solid lines are the completed trails and the dotted lines are the segments we're still working on. And one thing I want to point out is that the impact of trails are amplified significantly when you have a connected network. And so we have some fantastic trails in Baltimore, the Gwynns Falls Trail, the Jones Falls Trail, and the Herring Run Trail, and the Middle Branch Shoreline Trail. And then we count the Inner Harbor Promenade as a segment of our trail. Those are all great, but they're largely not connected to one another. And so we're really working on those east-west connections and some other connections that will make it easier to use for transportation and for just getting to your daily destination. So uses beyond only recreational. So trails are a lot more than just a day outside. And many people don't realize all the different ways that a trail network can impact a community. So I wanted to share a few of those. Trails are economic catalysts, so they are proven to increase local business spending, they create jobs, and they increase home values. So that can be beneficial to homeowners in terms of building wealth. It can also be beneficial to cities because of the increased tax revenue. Trails create more green space. They can create linear parks that provide gathering spaces for the community and connection between neighborhoods. And then they also reduce greenhouse gas emissions by shifting people away from fossil fuel burning vehicles. So a study that was done by EY and Greater Washington Partnership estimated that the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions when the Greenway Trails Network is completed would be equivalent to removing at least 750 cars from Baltimore's roads annually. So the opportunity of a trail network and all the benefits that they create for cities and all kinds of communities has been something that many cities across the United States have realized and have prioritized and invested in. And so I wanted to share a few that are great examples. The Indianapolis Cultural Trail on the left there, you can see just the beautiful urban trail that's protected, is connected to transit, has bike racks, etc. The Atlanta Beltline is, of course, very well known. There's tons and tons of development on the trail side there. And the Houston Bayou Greenway, which is the one that Chip Place developed, which is another fantastic example of an urban trail network. So what is happening with the Baltimore Greenway Trails Network? We have rekindled the Greenway Trails Coalition in the past couple of years. It kind of fizzled out during the pandemic, so had an opportunity to kind of rekindle that. The coalition has identified 5 priority trail projects that we've been really working hard to advocate for and advance. We've worked really hard with the city to bring in about $5 million in public and private funding in 2024 to advance the segments. And we commissioned, I'll share some data with you in a minute. We commissioned with the Central Maryland Transportation Alliance a poll of city voters about a year ago to get some data on how do people in Baltimore feel about trails? Do they want them? Do they use them? Do they know about them? Things like that. We've been working really hard to build political and public support, and we are also working hard with somebody else on this call. Brandy is part of our team to put together a strategy for equitable development along one particular corridor of the trails. So our coalition, what is the coalition? We are a group of individual trail champions and organizations who champion trails to organize other supporters citywide and advocate with elected officials for the completion of the Baltimore Greenway Trails. A core component of our coalition is neighborhood action teams. We're still organizing them, but the vision is that every trail segment in the network will have its own action team that will be made up of residents who live in the neighborhoods along that trail corridor. So action teams advocate for their trail segment, and then they serve as liaisons with their community for planning, designing, and programming their section of the trail. And then the coalition also sponsors an ongoing monthly bike ride or walk. This year's series is called A Year of Movement, and we partner with different member organizations of the coalition, such as Black People Ride Bikes, Latino Outdoors, AIA's Urban Design Committee, and others, Bike More, and each one features a segment of the Greenway Trails Network. And that's just a way to get people out on the trails, experiencing them, more comfortable with them, and knowing where they are. Here's just a picture from a ride we did last year that involved the trail in Herring Run Park. So what are our priority trail projects? So again, the coalition identified 5 projects that we wanted to really prioritize and advocate for. One of those is the Chinkapin Run Trail. So Chinkapin Run Park is a park that many people don't even know is there. It's in Northeast Baltimore, and it runs from Northern Parkway, not too far from Belvedere Square, all the way down to Morgan State's campus. So we, Rails to Trails, worked really hard to raise the money to start the 30% design process, and we're supported generously by the private philanthropic community in Baltimore with a large contribution from the France Merrick Foundation. So we're hoping to start that design process soon. And I should mention that we are partnering with Build and almost all of the neighborhood associations along the Chinkapin Run Park who are really excited about getting this trail advanced. So another priority project is the Druid Hill Park to Lake Montebello Trail. Sometimes people call this the 33rd Street Trail. 30% design is complete, and full design process should be starting soon. It was funded through a Transportation Alternatives grant last year. And we are looking for ways to fund construction. We had submitted with Baltimore DOT a federal grant to the EPA that would have funded construction, and we have not heard anything, and I don't think that we ever will, with the federal funding situation being what it is. So that's the status of that. So the Middle Branch Shoreline Trail is one that's already there, but it really needs to be redesigned, expanded, and improved. We know from, I don't know if any of you are aware, that Baltimore DOT has a dashboard where you can go look at the user counts of all the bike counters, and then Rails to Trails gave funding to the city to install 4 walking and biking counters, so pedestrian bike counters, and one of them is on the Middle Branch Shoreline Trail. And the batteries have been run out, so it hasn't been up recently, but based on data, checking it over a number of months, we have noticed that this trail is the most heavily used trail of all the trails that we have counters on. And so it is well loved, but it needs some improvement. The Jones Falls Gateway project is, again, there's an existing trail you can see in the picture here along Falls Road near the Streetcar Museum, that area, running up to Penn Station. It needs to be overhauled in a number of different ways. So we've been partnering with Midtown Community Benefits and Penn Station Partners and others, Friends of the Jones Falls, to advocate for this project. And it's funded through 30% design, and they have partial funding for the next stage of design. And then lastly, the East Side Connector Rail Trail. This is a Norfolk Southern Railroad line that runs from the Canton area due north parallel to Haven Street. And so we've been working closely with the planning department to raise money for acquisition. And the city should be re-entering negotiations with Norfolk Southern for the purchase or the rail banking TBD of this corridor to advance that trail. I've mentioned a lot of this funding, so I'm gonna skip over this quickly. But as I said earlier, about $5 million have come in. I didn't count this in that count. I didn't count this raise grant because it's much bigger than just the trail connection, but about $5 million for trails in the past year. And with the raise grant, significantly more. So I want to share a little bit from this poll that I mentioned that we commissioned with Central Maryland Transportation Alliance. I saw that Brian O'Malley's on here too. Worked really closely with them to co-commission a poll about a year ago of Baltimore City and Baltimore County voters. So I'm just going to share a couple data points. One of the questions was to give people $100 to spend, and if they were the government, asking them how they would distribute those funds. And so it was really interesting to see what people responded with. The largest, of course, was fixing and maintaining roads and highways. But everything else was very evenly distributed. So I'm going to show you a pie graph, actually. So on the right here is people's responses. And if you just look at the visual of the pie graph, it's very evenly balanced between fixing and maintaining roads and highways, expanding and building new public transportation, expanding and building new roads and highways, fixing and maintaining walking and biking facilities, and expanding and building new walking and biking facilities. When you compare that to the tip on the left, you can see that what people want is very different from the way that funding is currently allocated for transportation projects, which overwhelmingly is for highway preservation, capacity, and transit preservation. And in the tip, the walking and biking infrastructure is such a small portion of it that it doesn't even show up in the pie graph. Okay, we also wanted to know how much Baltimore voters wanted their elected officials to support trails. And so this was also really interesting. If you look at the total of who would be more likely to vote for an elected official who supports building, expanding, and maintaining trails, it was 58% total. And in the city, it was even higher, it was 60%. So that was overwhelmingly supportive and something that I hope our elected officials pay attention to. Okay, next. So we let folks know what the Baltimore Greenway Trails Network was, and we wanted to know if people supported or opposed it. So again, if you look at the total, it's 70%, that's county and city, and in the city, 71% support it. What was really interesting to me was looking at the total who oppose it, because there's been sort of a narrative that Baltimore City residents don't want this, at least in particular neighborhoods in particular. But really the percentage was only 4%, and pulling out even the data from the zip codes where there was the loudest opposition, those zip codes also only had a 4% opposition rate. So that was very interesting. Okay, and then how much do you believe trails can contribute to the well-being of a neighborhood? Again, looking at the total county and city, it was consistent across the board. 81% of people believe that trails contribute to the well-being of a neighborhood. So again, overwhelming support. So what are we doing to advance the trail network? Again, we're building political and public support. We've been with the coalition leadership meeting with elected officials, the mayor's office and city council members, including Councilmember Blanchard, who's on this call, sharing the poll results and advocating for our priority corridors. We've been working to get a lot of media coverage and have been pretty successful with that. And then just building public support by showing up at festivals, tabling, the Year of Rides or the Year of Movement events. We did a campaign. We're still doing it, called Be More Connected. I don't know if you saw our bus ads that ran all fall and through the winter. So just trying to elevate, raise the profile of the trail network and find the people who are our strongest champions and sort of pull them into helping us advocate for it. What are we doing on equitable development? I mentioned that that was a priority of ours. We know that large urban greenway trails carry among the highest risk of green gentrification, which can cause displacement of low-income homeowners and renters. And so we do not want that to be an outcome of the greenway trails here in Baltimore. So we've organized an equitable development project team that is working on generating a strategy for equitable development for the northern segments. So the trail connecting Lincoln Park to Druid Hill Park to Lake Montebello and Herring Run Parks. And you can see the team members down there below. And I didn't put Brandy Savarese on there in the list, but she is supporting this effort as well. I'm sorry, Brandy, about that. So what can you do to help? We are just asking people to advocate. The cities that have world-class trail networks are cities that prioritize it and invest in it and understand the value that they can bring for all the different ways that I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. So help us build political support by talking about the trail network with your elected officials and asking them to support it with funding and just prioritizing it. Would love for you to join our coalition. We meet quarterly, and the next meeting is on May 20th from 6 to 8 p.m. I put Greg Lawson's email at the bottom here. He is the Mid-Atlantic Director, and if you're interested in getting involved, please send him an email. And then if you'd like to be even more involved, we invite you to join a neighborhood action team or to help us form one near where you live. So again, reach out to Greg if you're interested in that. So that's the end. I whizzed through a lot of slides, but I wanted to leave some time for questions.
Thank you, Kate. That was extremely informative. You know, we meaning Transit Choices, we've been looking very forward to having you present
Thank you.
On behalf of the RTC. You do such great work. It's just important on so many levels. And, you know, we wanted to, you know, familiarize people with who you are, why your work is important, and, you know, what we can do to support your advocacy efforts. I know that there are questions in the chat, or I should say comments in the chat. Are there any questions that people would like to raise their hand and be acknowledged?
I'm looking at the chat here. Can I respond to the chat?
Yes, I was just going to say, please do.
So Councilmember Blanchard wants to know about the status of the Gwynns Falls Trail to Inner Harbor connection and where that falls on our priority list. So that is something that we've been talking about more recently. in particular because we know that that's important to you. And it is much more likely to be advanced when we have the support of a member of City Council. It is not in the top 5 priority trails for the coalition. But it is certainly an important connection, and we would love to work with you on that. So we can follow up offline, Zach.
Yeah,
I think the status has not changed from the last time we talked.
Yeah, I got you, Kate. And just to be brief on it, like it is, I think that's about as much of a chip shot. Like it's most of that connection is on 3-lane one-way streets on Montgomery, like 3-lane one-way low volume streets on Montgomery Light. And so that, that's, I think, a very straightforward that I'm just really confident that not only is the design easy, but we will get like kind of very clear community support for it. And both at the Federal Hill and I'm pretty confident we'll have it in Sharp as well. Sharp Lindholm. But so I just kind of want to emphasize that, it doesn't necessarily need to be a top 5 priority because I think it's a lot easier of a lift, like design, actual like construction, community support, costs. Obviously my enthusiasm is clear, but yeah, so I look forward to talking about it. Thanks,
Okay,
Kate.
let's find the time to meet about that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Let's see. Oh, there was a question about the grant from the state of Maryland. I'm really glad that you asked about that, Tommy. So the city did, and then Delegate Mark Edelson, thank goodness for his leadership, advocated really hard during the General Assembly session, and he got that funding restored. So so that money has been restored and is not lost. That was very upsetting to those of us who have been working hard to advance the trail network. And I'm very grateful to him for his leadership on that. Thanks for asking that question. There is an article that ran a week or 2 ago in the Banner that talks about the restored funding, if anybody wants to check it out. What is the current estimated cost to complete the network? I wish I knew. Costs have gone up so much since the pandemic. The EY impact report that Rails to Trails did with Greater Washington Partnership was done in 2020. And the estimated cost at that point for completing the network was $28 million. And last fall, when I was collaborating with the Baltimore DOT to write that grant to the EPA for the 33rd Street Trail, the estimate for construction of that whole segment from Druid Hill Park to Herring Run Park was, I want to say, like maybe 14 million, 15 million just for that segment. And so that's an illustration of the escalation of cost. So it is impossible for me to know. If I had to pick a number out of the air, maybe 150 million is what comes to mind. But it's impossible to know, honestly. I wish I could put a number on it. And with the federal funding situation being what it is, I don't know how we're going to find the funding to build things, but we're committed to it and we're working hard on it. Any other questions? I know we're almost out of time.
Kate, I think there are a couple of more.
Okay.
This was more of a comment from John Laria. He says that the Planning Commission has asked for a Greenway Trails briefing from city staff at today's meeting that is planned for 12:30 p.m.
Yes.
That is
Thanks
today.
For that reminder.
And then also there is a message in the chat asking, did Baltimore lose a 1.5 million grant from the state of Maryland in March 2021 for Greenway Trails Network?
Yes, that was the one I just answered that was restored because of advocacy from Delegate Mark Edelson.
That's in correlation. Yes, we can't say enough about Delegate Mark Edelson.
He's fantastic.
Fantastic, absolutely. Before we go to closing remarks, I would like to ask if anyone is new to the Transit Choices meetings. Again, welcome. It's our pleasure to have you join us. And if you would like to receive both future meeting notifications as well as the meeting materials from each monthly meeting, please put your contact information in the chat. And details regarding the next Transit Choices meeting will be announced soon. But at this point, I would like to invite Jimmy Rouse, who is a Transit Choices co-founder, to provide our closing remarks for today. Jimmy?
Hey, so first of all, I'd like to thank the presenters, Liz and Kate, but for such great presentations. It's wonderful to be on the listening end to the receiving end of these presentations. And these meetings provide a real opportunity for you all to directly connect with the public and for the public to be able to ask questions to you. And therefore, they serve a very valuable purpose in helping to advocate for better transit. And I also always like to thank the people who attend these meetings, because by doing that, you are in effect advocating for better transit. You enable us to attract better presenters and to increase the dialogue between the public and those in charge of the policy that makes for better transportation. So thank you all for coming to the meeting, and let other people know about the meetings, because the more people we get, the better it is, and for everybody, and for better transit in Baltimore. So thank you.
Thank you all, and we wish you a wonderful day.